heats up about the death penalty in New York, a survey of the nation's police chiefs concluded that police chiefs and county sheriffs do not think capital punishment is an effective law enforcement tool. Oh, wow. Jezebel, I wish you didn't look so worn out from your long day. We all want to watch Seinfeld, right? Yeah. So let's get the show on the road. I don't care if I don't have lipstick. I know.
You died.
As the debate heats up about the death penalty in New York, a survey of the nation's police chiefs concluded that most police chiefs and county sheriffs do not think that capital punishment is an effective law enforcement tool. The Death Penalty Information Center said that 2/3 of the police chiefs say they do not believe executions reduce homicides. The chiefs believe politicians support the death penalty to show that they are tough on crime. The officials put reducing drug abuse, improving the job market, and imposing longer prison sentences as better alternatives to reduce violent crime. Your wine versus coke. 18 New York City police shot 247 bullets, killing the gunman and a bystander. An officer, chasing a suspect in the subway beneath Rockefeller Center, shot himself in the thigh with his holstered gun. Panicked passengers stampede. 8 officers injure an armed bandit and a customer stopping the holdup of a small store. The scorecard? Police, 125 shots. Bad guys? 0. In all 3 recent incidents, police were carrying rapid-firing 9mm semi-automatic handguns. In the recent store shooting, one officer fired 45 bullets. Officials are worried that too many police bullets are flying for no reason. Quote, "I'm very interested in why anyone would need to fire that many rounds," said Police Commissioner Bratton. The police stopped using .38 caliber guns for semi-automatics in late 1993 because they were concerned that criminals were outgunning police. The Civilian Complaint Review Board issued a report showing an increase in fatal shootings involving police. Officers shot and killed 31 people, including 2 bystanders, in 1994. The semi-automatic is now used by the police in Atlanta, Boston, Los Angeles, and other large cities. Quote, "The 9mm is here to stay," said Bratton. "There's not even a contemplation about changing it." I lost my... The NAACP Board of Directors has spent as much time fighting amongst themselves lately as they have fighting racism. The NAACP's new board chairwoman, Marilee Evers-Williams, defeated longtime chairman William Gibson by 1 vote Saturday in a board election that revolved around Gibson's financial failures running the nation's oldest civil rights organization. On Wednesday, the NAACP put forth a lobbying agenda that includes preserving affirmative action, crime prevention programs, and the, quote, motor voter registration law opposing the balanced budget amendment and making sure welfare reform plans do not become vehicles for states' rights, a tool used in defranchising blacks before the 1960s. Let's just keep, I'm going to keep reading. NAACP members began lobbying Congress in time to watch the House take its first swipe at affirmative action, voting 381 to 44 to eliminate a tax break intended to encourage minority ownership of broadcast and cable outlets.
Holy shit.
The NAACP Board of Directors has spent as much time fighting amongst themselves lately as they have fighting racism. The NAACP's new board chairwoman, Marilee Evans Williams, defeated longtime chairman William. Fucking so long. I gotta go home. The NAACP Board of Directors has spent as much time fighting amongst themselves lately as they have fighting racism. The NAACP's new board chairwoman, Marilee Evers Williams, defeated longtime chairman William Gibson by 1 vote Saturday in a board election where she charged Gibson with financial mistakes and worse, running the NAACP. On Wednesday, the NAACP put forth a lobbying agenda that includes preserving affirmative action, crime prevention programs, the motor voter registration law, opposing the balanced budget amendment, and making sure welfare reform plans do not become a tool used to disenfranchise blacks. The House took its first swipe at affirmative action, voting 381 to 44 to eliminate a minority tax break. Quote, obviously we have an assault on black America, said Leon Russell, an NAACP board member. Quote, what they're saying is that there are things that should be reserved for white males. That sucked, but I don't want to read it again. A doctor whose controversial treatments have drawn celebrity clients, including Muhammad Ali, must pay $14 million for negligence in treating a woman's breast cancer, a jury ruled. The Taylors claim that the doctor was negligent in adding the drug mitomycin C to her standard chemotherapy drugs. As a result of the treatment, Mrs. Taylor suffered kidney damage and became too weak for other cancer treatments. Cancer has since spread to her lungs and liver and recurred in her breast. The jury awarded $4 million in compensatory damages and $10 million in punitive damages. Medenica's treatments include blood cleansing, the procedure that Ali underwent. The boxing champion almost died during treatment when his blood pressure dropped dangerously low. Medenica said Ali suffered from pesticide poisoning. Mississippi state senators killed a bill Tuesday that would have legalized whippings for convicted felons. A Senate Judiciary Subcommittee unanimously rejected the bill, which had cleared the House as part of a proposal allowing judges to order a defendant to perform hard labor. The bill gave circuit and county judges the option to order paddlings. It did not specify what device would be used or who would deliver the licks. Senator Kay Cobb said judges already can order defendants to work off fines. Joe Clay Hamilton, another state senator, said some senators supported the bill only because it was popular among Mississippians fearful of crime. Quote, people are going to grandstand to the public, especially in an election year, he said. The bill cannot be revived, but the paddling provision could be inserted in another bill. I should read that again. That was reading kind of fast.
So, picture this. Hundreds of thousands of people around the country struggling to get the cork out of their wine bottles. Does it amuse you? It didn't amuse the manufacturer of the wine. He had to recall 700,000 bottles of wine because the corks got glued into the bottles and couldn't be removed. A winery sued the cork maker, and a jury ruled that the cork maker had to pay $1 million to the winery. They had to reseal 700,000 bottles. Jury ruled that Portacork in Napa County, California, breached its contract by supplying corks coated with an emulsifier that acted like a glue, virtually cementing the stoppers into almost an entire year's worth of wines. Sonoma Cutler Vineyards had to recall most of its 1986 vintage.
You want to redo it?
No.
Sounds good to me.
Okay? What's the next story? A judge declared a mistrial after jurors deadlocked in the case of 4 tobacco companies accused of causing lung cancer death of a longtime smoker. Superior Court Judge Kenneth Johnson declared the mistrial after the 6 jurors deliberated for 21 hours without reaching a verdict. Yvonne and Richard Rogers sued 4 tobacco companies in 1987. Mr. Rogers died later that year at age 52. His widow continued the suit, accusing the companies of negligence. The case was the first to go to trial since last spring's congressional hearings, at which witnesses testified that tobacco company officials knew that nicotine was addictive and hid that information from the public. Mrs. Rogers' attorneys argued that despite her husband's strong-minded nature, he couldn't overcome the addiction to nicotine he had developed from smoking from age 5 until a year before he died. The lawsuit claimed that the tobacco companies promoted cigarette smoking as safe. Tobacco company lawyers countered that Rogers should have been able to kick his 2 or 3 pack a day habit, and that he continued to smoke despite knowing the risks. A $400,000 award against the tobacco company was won by the family of a New Jersey resident, but it was overturned on appeal. The tobacco companies have yet to be held liable for the deaths caused by their products. Next story. Family members of a slain abortion doctor are suing the clinic where he shot, claiming it negligently failed to provide him with proper protection. The lawsuit contends that Pensacola Women's Medical Services knew that Dr. David Gunn had received serious death threats and received a letter bomb, and it therefore should have provided better security protection for him, such as building a fence or providing a security guard to escort the doctor from his car to the clinic. The lawsuit also claims the clinic should have warned Gunn not to come to work on March 10, 1993, because a protest was being held there, and one demonstrator kept coming to the back door, prompting clinic officials to call police. The lawsuit alleges the staff didn't try to warn Gunn by calling his pager, and they should have. Abortion opponent Michael Griffin was convicted of shooting Gunn and sentenced to life in prison for the murder. Last July, former Minister Paul Hill used a shotgun outside another abortion clinic in Pensacola to murder Dr. John Bayard Britton and a volunteer who escorted him. Hill, 41, is awaiting execution in the electric chair. Was I frowning?
You should stop talking right after this.
A New Jersey state judge upheld a law that requires sex offenders to register with police, but stripped county prosecutors of power to decide which offenders pose a risk that warrants a public warning. Superior Court Judge Harold Wells said a risk assessment of past sex offenders and decisions about whether to notify the community about them should be up to a judge after a hearing. The law gave county prosecutors full authority to review records and to classify offenders as low, moderate, or high risk. But Wells said sex offenders are entitled to due process under law, permitting them to give their side of the story and to challenge the prosecutor's evidence about risk. Megan's Law was named for 7-year-old Megan Kenka, who was killed in July allegedly by a convicted sex offender who lived across the street and whose criminal past was not known to his neighbors. Megan's mother, Maureen Kenka, who pushed for the law, said she was pleased it passed its first substantial court test. Wells ruled on a challenge to the law brought by a former sex offender known as John Doe, who was released on parole in 1992 and who didn't want to surrender his anonymity by registering with police. Wells set a February 28th deadline for Doe to register with police. Doe's attorney, John Furlong, said he would appeal Wells's ruling on the constitutionality of Megan's Law, but he said he was pleased that his client's fate would be in the hands of a judge rather than law enforcement officials. Attorney General Deborah Porritt said that in the absence of an appeals court decision on the matter, the ruling would apply across the state.
This is kind of not an up-to-date story.
I know that. I know it's changed.
Federal judge just tossed me.
That was okay. It was all good.
Yeah, so I mean, if you fuck up, then you fuck up. You just correct it. And then go on. Actually, it makes it a little more interesting if you fuck up a little bit, I think.
It does,
Because it's unexpected. Yeah. Yeah.
I think he's fine.
Sure. So that I'm
I
satisfied.
thought it was stopping and I just turned it on off, so the thing went off for a second and went right back on.
Oh, that's okay.
Just looks like a technical faux pas, but
Yeah, it's
nothing
okay.
huge.
No big deal.
So
So
oh, the lights aren't even on. Carbon monoxide overcame 9 people at a dance class, and a nurse who arrived to pick up her daughter is credited with alerting authorities who pulled them to safety. Cheryl Cassidy said she opened the door of the art center inside a converted church building, and the instructor's father collapsed in front of her. Then she saw her 11-year-old daughter, Rachel, 6 other students, and the dance teacher lying unconscious. She suspected carbon monoxide poisoning, and before helping even her daughter, she ran across the street to the home of Dawes County Sheriff Carl Daly. He called the rescue squad, and he and his sons began pulling people to safety. All 9 were treated at a nearby hospital and held overnight for observation.
okay, you ready?
So
It's rolling.
it's rolling, okay. Wait, let it go for 5 seconds of quiet, then hit the space bar, and then we'll go. And you start?
Sure.
Is your headroom small?
Yeah, it's a little tight, but you're in the picture.
Quiet.
Thank you.
Doctor Who's controversial treatments have drawn celebrity clients, including Muhammad Ali, must pay $14
This
million
isn't the right
for
story.
negligence in treating
This
a
isn't the
woman's
right
breast
story.
cancer. No, it isn't.
Well, I thought you loaded it.
No, I didn't.
Oh.
Maybe I did, but
Sit, slouch a little.
it's rolling. An Athens, Georgia law which sought to curtail shoplifting and other crimes by banning 21 residents from downtown stores was dropped after a constitutional challenge by 12 of those individuals who were banned.
Some on the list, which includes people ages 16 to 30, said they had to drive 6 miles to Greensboro to shop. Although they were, oh, wait, sorry. Let's just start over. I'm sorry, that won't happen one more time. You're very good at the 5, 4, 3.
Okay, now
I
we're
think you
rolling.
want to be a director.
We're rolling.
All right.
Now some more on Southern justice. An Athens, Georgia law which sought to curtail shoplifting and other crimes by banning 21 residents from town was dropped after a constitutional challenge by 12 of those people who'd been banned from the town.
Some of the people on the list, which includes people ages 16 to 30, said they had to drive 6 miles to Greensboro to shop. Although all on the list were black, city officials and merchants denied any racial motive.
The 12 banned have joined 2 federal lawsuits charging that their civil rights were violated. Atkins said that most on the list had never been charged with shoplifting, theft, or burglary.
Police identified them as people that they had to deal with regularly.
The store owners got together and decided that those are the people that should be banned from the center of town.
Not very fair, but I guess that's Southern justice for you.
Well, it's certainly effective, if not fair.
Ready?
Well, we got some more Southern justice for you here. An Athens, Georgia law which sought to curtail shoplifting and other crimes by banning 21 residents from downtown stores was dropped after a constitutional challenge by 12 of those people who'd been banned from the town.
Some of the people on the list, which includes people ages 16 to 30, said they have to drive 6 miles to Greensboro to shop. Although all on the list were black, city officials and merchants denied any racial motive.
The 12 banned have joined 2 federal lawsuits charging that their civil rights were violated. Atkins said most on the list had never been charged with shoplifting, theft, or burglary.
Police identified the people as people they had to deal with regularly.
The shop owners from the center of town got together and decided that those people should be banned because they were a threat to the safety of the shop owners. Now more on Southern justice. In Athens, Georgia law, it sought to curtail shoplifting and other crimes by banning 21 residents from downtown stores was dropped after a constitutional challenge by 12 of those individuals who'd been banned.
Some of the people on the list, which includes people ages 16 to 30, said they have to drive 6 miles to Greensboro to shop. Although all the people on the list were black, city officials and merchants denied any racial motive.
The way they decided who should be banned was by having the shop owners get together and pick those individuals who they thought might shoplift from their stores.
Doesn't sound fair. The 12 banned have joined together with two...
Have joined 2 federal lawsuits. Now more on some Southern justice. In Athens, Georgia law, it sought to curtail shoplifting and other crimes by banning 21 residents from downtown stores was dropped after a constitutional challenge by 12 of those people who'd been banned.
Some on the list, which includes people ages 16 to 30, said they had to drive 6 miles to Greensboro to shop. Although all on the list were black, city officials and merchants denied any racial motive.
The way the shop owners chose who to be banned was they all got together and said, look, we think these 21 individuals might shoplift from our stores, so let's ban them from town.
Doesn't seem fair. The 12 banned have joined 2 federal lawsuits charging that their civil rights were violated. Atkins said most on the list had never been charged with shoplifting, theft, or burglary. So how they ended up on this list is a little beyond me.
Well, they got together and said, get them out of town. Police identified them as people they had to deal with regularly, but they'd never been charged with anything.
Well, we'll follow up with the civil rights suit they have pending.
Why don't they just whip them a little bit, like on that other story? They cane them and then send them out of town, too. That'll keep them from coming back.
All right. Oops, we changed.
Now, more on some Southern justice. In Athens, Georgia law, which sought to curtail shoplifting and other crimes by banning 21 residents from downtown stores, was dropped after a constitutional challenge by 12 of those banned.
Some of the people on the list, which includes people ages 16 to 30, said they had to drive 6 miles to Greensboro to shop. Although all on the list were black, city officials and merchants denied any racial motive.
12 banned have joined 2 federal lawsuits charging that their civil rights were violated. Atkins said that most on the list had never been charged with shoplifting, theft, or burglary.
So I don't see how they would end up on this list anyway.
I'll tell you how they got on the list.
Well, police had identified them as people they had to deal with regularly.
That's right, and the shop owners got together and said, those guys should be banned from our stores, so why don't we ban them from town? So it's not surprising that the law was held to be unconstitutional. But that sure am some fine judgment Southern justice. Now for some more fine Southern justice. In Athens, Georgia law, it sought to curtail shoplifting and other crimes by banning 21 residents from downtown stores was dropped after a constitutional challenge by 12 of those banned.
Some of the people on the list, which includes people ages 16 to 30, said they had to drive 6 miles to Greensboro to shop. Although all on the list were black, city officials and merchants denied any racial motive.
The 21 people were chosen by shop owners.
12.
There was 21, and then 12 of them got together and sued, but 21 of them were banned from the center of town because they were
well, the 12 who band together to
crap.
sue are right on the money because they just kind of got blackballed for no reason.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is, and that's a strange form of Southern justice that I guess takes place in some small towns. But it was held to be unconstitutional. That's what our Constitution's about, folks, protecting those kind of people.
I'll start. The United States may deny entry to billionaire French politician André Betancourt because he wrote anti-Jewish articles during the Holocaust.
The Frenchman is a L'Oreal.
L'Oreal!
L'Oreal,
Cosmetics,
executive and member of France's Senate. On Tuesday, Nazi hunter Serge Klarsfeld, did I pronounce that correctly, showed reporters a letter indicating that the Justice Department's Office of Special Investigation was reviewing the case.
Bettencourt, a close associate of French President François Mitterrand, said in a statement that his anti-Nazi efforts later in the war showed that he was atoned for the anti-Semitic writing he had done earlier.
My actions in the resistance, like my political record, demonstrate that I was aware of the error I made in writing articles for La Terre Française, which I have never stopped regretting, and which I always beg the Jewish community to forgive, he said. La Terre Française, or the French land, was a Nazi-controlled newspaper.
In a French front page address in April 1941, the young Bettencourt wrote, quote, "Jews, hypocritical Pharisees. Their race has been forever sullied."
They will be cursed by all.
That's what he said. Bettencourt stepped down in December as vice chairman of L'Oreal. He remains chairman of the holding company that owns a majority of L'Oreal Cosmetics. That was fine. We
Good
had
pronunciation.
John, where am I sitting? Maybe
Maybe you should sit on my lap for these.
you should sit on my face. I don't even know what that means, but guys used to say it to me. Wait, we have to hit the thing to start.
All right. It's on.
No, it's not on record.
Yes, it was.
Oh, muchos.
Okay, you ready?
You start.
A loophole in the 94-year-old extradition treaty may free an international fugitive who illegally shipped 90 tons of mustard gas ingredients to Iran.
It took federal agents 6 years to find German exporter Peter Walaszek, whose 1988 conviction in Baltimore came after thousands died from chemical warfare in the Iran-Iraq war. Walaszek has been in jail in Croatia since November 11th of last year, when police spotted his name in a Zagreb hotel
hotel.
And arrested him.
We're very, very anxious to get this guy back, said Agent Dennis Bass, an investigator with the U.S. Customs Service in Baltimore. He was dealing mustard gas to an enemy of the U.S. and the Western world.
But there's a hitch. Extraditions from Croatia are covered by a 1901 treaty that spells out 12 categories of crimes, but does not mention illegal exporting. To get within a treaty category, prosecutors could argue that falsification of shipping documents was a form of fraud and therefore covered by the treaty.
After pleading guilty in U.S. District Court in Baltimore, Walaszek agreed to be an undercover operative for the U.S. government in an investigation into lethal chemical exports. But instead of helping authorities, he fled the country while awaiting sentencing. He was facing up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine when he disappeared.
Come on. Ready?
A loophole in 1994, in a loophole in 94-year-old extradition treaty. Okay, let's start over.
Why we need 5 full seconds?
No,
We just do.
Just count it off. Now you're ready. A loophole in 94-year-old extradition treaty may free an international fugitive who illegally shipped 90 tons of mustard gas ingredients to Iran.
It took federal agents 6 years to find German exporter Peter Walaszek, whose 1988 conviction in Baltimore came after thousands died from chemical warfare in the Iran-Iraq war. Walaszek has been in jail in Croatia since November 11th, when police spotted his name in a Zagreb hotel guest book and arrested him.
We're very, very anxious to get this guy back, said Agent Dennis Bass, an investigator with the U.S. Customs Service in Baltimore. He was dealing mustard gas to an enemy of the United States and the Western world.
But there's a hitch. Extraditions from Croatia are covered by a 1901 treaty that spells out 12 categories of crimes, but does not mention illegal exporting. To To get within a treaty category, prosecutors could argue that falsification of shipping documents was a form of fraud and therefore covered by the treaty.
After pleading guilty in U.S. District Court in Baltimore, Woloschuk agreed to be an undercover operative for the United States government in an investigation into lethal chemical exports. But instead of helping authorities, he fled the country while awaiting sentencing. He was facing up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine when he disappeared.
I don't blame him for getting out. The manufacturer of vinyl plastics produces wastes that in some cases have dioxin levels comparable to the high concentrations found in the highly toxic defoliant Agent Orange. The environmental group Greenpeace claimed all of that.
The group said it had secretly obtained waste samples from 9 chemical plants in Louisiana and Texas where vinyl plastic resins are produced and found significantly high concentrations of dioxin.
Dioxin, which causes cancer, is a byproduct of chlorine-based chemistry. Chlorine is involved in making the raw plastic resins that are used to make vinyl or PVC products. These products range from plumbing pipes to siding and raincoats.
William Carroll, a scientist with the Chlorine Chemistry Council and the Vinyl Institute, said the manufacture of PVC feedstock is a minimal contributor of dioxin. He said no detectable levels have been found in the actual feedstock resins, and the waste cited by Greenpeace are not released into the environment.
Greenpeace obtained 25 waste samples from the 9 chemical facilities. Levels of the pollutant were found at concentrations similar to what was found in waste from the manufacture of Agent Orange, the highly toxic defoliant used in Vietnam War. They're Spanish, John. A gay clergyman arrested 1 week ago while trying to meet with Pat Robertson said Wednesday he would end a week-long jailhouse fast if the religious broadcaster condemns anti-gay violence. Quote, "I don't think Pat Robertson wants anyone hurt or beaten or killed," White said. "But when you get up in a theater and yell fire, people are trampled and you are responsible for those deaths." He was referring to Robertson's preaching about hatred towards gays. White maintains that Robertson uses anti-homosexual language in his 700 Club to show on the Christian Broadcast Network and in fundraising appeals. White was a ghostwriter for a Robertson book in 1986. He said he acknowledged his homosexuality in 1991 and severed all ties to Robertson. Robertson, of course, believes the Bible condemns homosexuality as a sin. Can we read it again?
Sure.
A gay clergyman arrested a week ago while trying to meet with Pat Robertson said he would end a week-long jailhouse fast if the religious broadcaster condemns anti-gay violence. Quote, "I don't think Pat Robertson wants anybody hurt or beaten or killed," the prisoner said, "but when you get up in a theater and yell fire, people get trampled. You are responsible for those deaths." White maintains that Robertson uses anti-homosexual language in his 700 show on the Christian Broadcast Network and in fundraising appeals. White was a ghostwriter for a Robertson book in 1986. He said he acknowledged his homosexuality in 1991 and severed all ties to Robertson. Robertson, of course, believes the Bible condemns homosexuality as a sin. A gay clergyman was arrested while trying to meet with Pat Robertson, said he would end his week-long jailhouse fast if the religious broadcaster condemns anti-gay violence. Quote, "I don't think Pat Robertson wants anybody hurt or beaten or killed," the prisoner said, "but when you get up in a theater and yell fire, people get trampled and you are responsible for those deaths." White maintains that Robertson uses anti-homosexual language in his 700 Club show on the Christian Broadcast Network and in fundraising appeals. White, the prisoner, was a ghostwriter for Robertson for a book that he wrote in 1986. Then, later, he acknowledged his homosexuality and severed all ties with Robertson. Robertson, of course, believes that the Bible condemns homosexuality as a sin. I like the first one better. Who's starting?
Go ahead.
The candles burned in the living room and the bathroom. New Age music filled the house. The bath was drawn. The bed sheets were ruffled. Nicole Brown Simpson may have been planning for romance the night she was murdered.
O.J. Simpson's lawyer suggests, what are you doing here?
Ready? Yeah. The candles burned in the living room and the bathroom. New Age music filled the house. The bath was drawn. The bed sheets were ruffled.
Nicole Brown Simpson may have been planning for romance the night she was murdered, O.J. Simpson's lawyer suggested Wednesday, but police ignored these clues and the possibility of a mysterious gentleman caller in their investigation.
Over and over, defense attorney Johnny Cochran Jr. pressed Detective Tom Lang during cross-examination Wednesday.
Did police check whether Mrs. Simpson had a male visitor that night?
Did they photograph the 9 candles burning upstairs?
Did they perform tests to determine if she'd been raped?
The normally placid Lang, on the stand for the 3rd day, bristled at the questions. He insisted that the only man to visit Miss Simpson that night was Ronald Goldman.
In my observation and my experience, sex was the last thing on the mind of this attacker, Lang said. It was an overkill, a brutal overkill. There was no evidence of rape.
Cochran seemed taken back by Lang's statement and tried to object in mid-sentence, but was overruled. Court was recessed for the day moments later.
Cross-examination was part of a long-range strategy by the defense to portray the police investigation as sloppy and incomplete, or even worse, a frame job.
I doubt it.
Do you wonder what's happening behind the scenes with the O.J. jury?
If they're going through anything like a mock jury in Texas, there may be additional murders before the trial is over.
Of jurors, that is. A Texas newspaper assembled a mock jury to listen to the trial on TV, but during the process the jurors got so angry at each other that they almost came to blows, and the newspaper had to disband the jury for their own safety.
That reminds me, Barbara Walters and Sam Donaldson almost came to blows last night talking about the case.
I know how they feel.
The paper had chosen 10 people to watch the trial on television each day and offer their opinions about the day's events. There were problems from the start, stemming from sex, age, and racial differences.
The decision to disband the jury came after an argument that erupted when a white juror did not move out of the way for a black juror.
A 3rd juror, a white woman, got involved because she felt the whole white panelist who wears a hearing aid didn't hear the request to move.
The personality clash was so great that one juror, Andrea Davis, said, "If it wasn't one thing, it was another. I was just so happy to leave in the afternoon."
Similar difficulties can be expected to occur among the real Simpson jury, who, unlike the mock ones, are not allowed to discuss the case until deliberations begin and are altogether much more than the mock jury was.
Such
they're
differences
together more.
Such differences also often result in hung juries based less on the evidence in the case than on stubborn contrariness between jurors.
Contrariness. The City of Angels is already planning a sequel to the O.J. trial. If that happens, District Attorney Gil Garcetti vowed in a CBS interview to seek another trial if this one ends in a mistrial or hung jury.
If we wind up with the hung jury in this case, I'll tell you right now, if the case is 11-1 in favor of acquittal, which would be a shock to me if that happens, we will retry this case, he said.
Well, we'll see what happens.
O.J. Simpson 2. Go ahead.
Do you wonder what's happening behind the scenes with the O.J. jury?
If they're going through anything like the mock jury in Texas went through, there may be additional murders before the trial's over of jurors.
A Texas newspaper assembled a mock jury to listen to the trial on TV, but during the process, the jurors got so angry at each other that they almost came to blows, and the newspaper had to disband the jury for their own safety.
The paper had chosen 10 people to watch the trial on television each day and offer their opinions about the day's events. There were problems from the start, stemming from sex, age, and racial differences.
The decision to disband the jury came after an argument that erupted when a white juror did not move out of the way for a black juror.
A third juror, a white woman, got involved because she felt the white panelist, who wears a hearing aid, just didn't hear the request to move.
The personality clash was so great that one juror, Andrea Davis, said, quote, "If it wasn't one thing, it was another. I was just so happy to leave in the afternoon."
Similar difficulties can be expected to occur among the real Simpson jurors, who, unlike the mock ones, are not allowed to discuss the case until deliberations begin, and are together much more than the mock jury was.
Such differences often result in hung juries, based less on the evidence in the case than on stubborn contrariness between jurors.
The City of Angels is already planning a sequel to the O.J. trial if that happens. District Attorney Gil Garcetti vowed in a CBS interview to seek another trial if this one ends in a mistrial or a hung jury.
No, I can't wait to see the second trial. Quote, he said, "If we wind up with a hung jury in this case, I'll tell you right now, if the case is 11-1 in favor of acquittal, which would be a shock to me if that happens, we will retry this case." Oh, it smells like chocolate cake and beer.
In
Wait a sec.
In Soquel, California, burning road flares were
Can you
thrown.
start? I'm not doing that.
Oh, well.
All right.
Okay. In Soquel, California, burning road flares were thrown on the roof of an abortion clinic early Tuesday morning in an apparent arson attempt. 3 flares landed on the asphalt roof of the Choice Medical Clinic, sending smoke into the building and charring the roof slightly. It was the first attack on the clinic, and there had not been any threats prior to the early morning assault.
Despite the flares, the clinic opened as usual Tuesday morning. Arsonists hit 4 other California abortion clinics earlier this month. These people have got to be stopped.
In an effort to reduce youth crime, Arkansas State Police want to fingerprint anyone under 18 who applies for a driver's license.
The American Civil Liberties Union says it would violate the right of privacy.
The plan has been approved by the Arkansas House and will be considered by the Senate Judiciary Committee.
The ACLU's Arkansas chapter executive director, Rita Spillinger, said that, quote, "The issue is not whether or not it works, but whether or not we want to live this way. Lots of things would help us fight crime," she said. "If we fingerprinted everybody, if we searched anybody's home or persons anytime without reason, all of these things would help solve or prevent more crimes."
6 states require some type of fingerprinting when applying for a driver's license, but none of them confine the fingerprinting to juveniles.
He also argued that singling out persons under 18 for fingerprinting unfairly stigmatizes them. Some members of the Arkansas House want to broaden the plan to apply to all first-time license applicants.
But Major Craig Masterson of the New York State Police favors zero tolerance for juveniles. California, Texas, Hawaii, and Colorado require anyone applying for a driver's license to be fingerprinted.
New Jersey fingerprints anyone obtaining a commercial driver's license. Arizona requires it only of school bus drivers.
It's an interesting plan. What do you think, Shauna?
I don't know. I guess in Arkansas, the bus drivers must be the people robbing houses.
Well, you know what it would mean is that they would have a file that they could put on the computers of all the fingerprints, and then they could create software that could search the computer, and anytime something's stolen, they would be able to just cause a search to be made on the computer and come up with that person's fingerprints and that person's name and address.
Sounds like a good plan to me.
Trade-off. All right.
I bet you Jane doesn't like my hair like this either.
In In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 2 retired FAA inspectors pleaded guilty Tuesday to allowing a now-defunct charter airline to continue flying even though they knew it had safety problems.
John Doster, 78, and Steve Kiladanis, 63, each pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the government. They face maximum prison terms of 5 years and fines of $250,000 each at a May sentencing hearing.
The former Federal Aviation Administration inspectors pleaded guilty during a hearing before U.S. District Judge Stuart Dalzell after 2 weeks of testimony in a 3-week trial.
Gosh, these names are a killer. One defendant, Earl M. Holtz, 50 years old, owner of the now-defunct Northeast Jet, is still fighting the charges. Northeast Jet built a reputation by jetting celebrities anywhere they wanted. The company was shut down in 1988 after 3 pilots died in plane crashes from 1980 through 1988.
Government lawyers have said they believe the case represented the first time that FAA inspectors faced criminal charges for failing to carry out their duties. Certainly gives you a sense of confidence, doesn't it, when the people who are inspecting the planes are being charged and convicted of
Oh, it
crimes.
looks all right. Just send it up. Get like you.
Oh,
I don't surf at a bar when there's no waves.
You don't know how to surf. For those parents out there whose children have drug problems, don't feel you're alone.
Another famous politician's child was busted. This time, Denver Mayor Wellington Webb's son, Alan. Alan was videotaped trying to remove what appeared to be crack cocaine from his pants while in jail on an assault warrant.
He was arrested for possession of a controlled substance and jailed in lieu of $10,000 bond, police said.
Last September, the mayor had asked a probate judge to place his son in a treatment program. He then withdrew the request after his son voluntarily entered a hospital. I guess she shouldn't have been so hasty to withdraw the request.
The kid was trying
Trying to what?
to clean up. It ain't so easy.
It didn't look like he was trying to clean up. He was in jail on an assault thing. Well, anyway, good luck to you, little Andy. Whatever.
Say that again.
How for an outtake, just planned.
Okay, are we ready?
We're not going to need all these stories.
Yeah, we are. A 2-year legal battle ended up in a court order requiring the Bloomingdale Public School to remove a framed picture of Jesus Christ from a public high school hallway Tuesday.
Quote, "We don't want to do it," the school board president said. "If it wouldn't be for a contempt of court, we wouldn't do it." The quote, are they talking about doing it or are they taking the picture down?
I think you're misconstruing doing it. Okay, ready? A 2-year legal battle ended up in a court order requiring the Bloomingdale Public School to remove a framed picture of Jesus Christ from a public high school hallway Tuesday.
The school president said we didn't want to do it, but if it weren't for contempt of court, we wouldn't have to do it.
The portrait was placed in storage.
That's the stupidest quote.
Well, you know, you can't change his words.
I know, but you don't have to throw every quote. You quote crazy.
Are you ready?
I'm not. I'm starting, and you can go through that.
Okay,
hellish
I'll do
quote.
that. I'll show you how to
Okay, ready?
remember that.
A 2-year legal battle ended up in a court order requiring the Bloomingdale Public School to remove a framed picture of Jesus Christ from a public high school hallway.
Well, they shouldn't have framed Jesus. We don't want to do it, the school board president says, but and we wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for the contempt of court order.
The portrait was placed in storage. We're hoping it can get back up.
The
Is what
picture
they
had been
said.
bolted to a wall outside the principal's office for about 30 years. Eric Penzinger, an agnostic, sued the school at the start of his senior year in 1992. Those seniors get smart, saying the portrait made him feel like an outsider.
I don't know why. The court held that the picture violated the constitutional law on government establishment of religion.
In November 1993, the school board rejected a settlement that would have allowed the picture to stay if portraits of Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. were also put up.
Well, I think that's kind of elevating those two people.
Well, I think it's stupid not to accept the settlement. When
I think
somebody
that was a
else-
perfectly appropriate settlement,
Of
sure.
course, he's a historical figure, if nothing else.
You'll be damned.
Michael Jackson every week.
Nah.
Yeah, forget Michael Jackson.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hello and welcome to Durst Law. I'm Shauna Conley.
Hey, I'm John Durst.
This week we're going to talk about a lot of things.
What are we going to talk about, Shauna?
Well, we're going to talk about how mayor's son gets busted for smoking crack and while he's already in jail.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And we're going to talk about a lot of our standard themes. Last week we got a call from a guy who wanted to debate me on whether there should be separation of church and state. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about how our Constitution does separate church from state and keep in the keeping of a framed picture of Jesus Christ out of the hallway of a Bloomingdale public school.
We're also going to talk about how some of those pro-life lunatics are going around and bombing and killing and doing all those wonderful things that they seem to be doing.
They seem to do that every week, don't they?
I'm a little confused. Is pro-life, is the word pro mean something?
Yeah, they're professional killers.
Oh, okay. Very
And
strange.
we're going to talk a little bit about Muhammad Ali's doctor, who was found liable for medical malpractice and had to pay $14 million to somebody. He had some very unusual health aids for Muhammad Ali.
And John and I will talk a little bit about Southern justice, and we have plenty more stories this week, so why don't y'all just stick around? Was that too off the cuff? Wait, let's stop it. Let's just think of a few things that we could talk about, because I can't remember the stories.
Well, let's just wing it. And believe me, it comes out kind of different
Okay,
that way.
okay.
You know, and then you can always edit it.
Okay.
Right. Well, that was
Wait.
some... Okay, go ahead.
What a great show once again. Tuesday nights in Manhattan will never be the same.
Really not for me, because I got to watch the show every time.
Just kidding.
No, this is well, I hope we covered some of the topics that you find interesting this show, because we do find them interesting. There's a lot of news every day that's staggering to me about bombing of churches and bombing of abortion clinics, and you never know what's going to happen, and we find it never-ending source of amusement.
And all of you out there that are watching, give us some feedback. Give us a call, and we'd love to talk to you and see what you think about the show. And if you have any questions, or call us.
And if you have any knowledge about how to handle microphones so we don't get any buzz or hum or distortion, that'd help too.
Well, we'll work on that on our end here. Thanks for tuning in.
See you next week.
We shouldn't beg the help.
Take two.
Asking you for that. That's
No, I like asking them to call in and say what they think and what they...
Go ahead.
Well, I think that we had a pretty interesting show. Lots of interesting stories.
Well, there's a never-ending source of amusement out there in the news, I think.
Some of the stuff is losing its funny bone with me as far as...
The bombing of the abortion clinics. I
Yeah.
know you don't like that. The
I don't like
bashing
the hatred towards gays that the Catholic Church seems to be expelling in the name of God.
I was pretty amazed that the school in Bloomingdale didn't accept the settlement in which they would put Martin Luther King and Abe Lincoln next to Jesus Christ, because I think they're all historical figures, and if nothing else, we can respect Jesus, Mohammed, Confucius, and all those other heroes for what they are, at least, as being historic figures.
That's a good point. And anyone out there that's got a question or comment or legal problem, you can give us a call here, and we'd be glad to talk to you and see what we can do.
We do try to cover all the issues that occur in the city, as well as issues that occur in the nation concerning safety and health of the public. And we try to get some of that news out, which may not be on the national news, but we think is important for us New Yorkers.
So you can catch us next week at the same time, same channel. I hope you tune in.
Thanks for watching.
You come back and forth, and then I'm going to tell people to give us a call in.
Well,
with
did
their
you
questions.
like the smoke? Do you like those smoking lawsuits?
Well, you just have to see.
I like them.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Well, I think we had a pretty good show, John.
Yeah. Never-ending source of news. What do you think of the the lawsuits against the smoking companies?
Well, I think it's interesting. It's one way to, I
You
don't
think
know.
we should be able to sue smoking companies for
Gee,
selling them lousy
Why would I
products
care?
to
My dad
people?
doesn't work on a tobacco farm.
Yeah, well, good. I think we should take them tobacco farms and...
But I think people
Turn
in
over.
this country and in the city especially should take some responsibility for their own things, and I don't think there's hardly anybody out there who doesn't know the risks and dangers involved with cigarette smoking. So I think to turn around and blame it on a company is a little bit kind of not taking responsibility for yourself, in my opinion.
Well, you know, we have a...
Which is not necessarily the opinion of Durst Law Firm.
Definitely not the opinion of Durst Law Firm. In fact, we sue manufacturers of products all the time because the products aren't safe, they're dangerous, they're defective. We sue them left and right. And here we have companies around the country selling the most dangerous, killing product that's been known to man. There's nothing that has caused more deaths than cigarettes. And we can't sue those people because of a weird doctrine of assumption of risk. I think that's absurd. And I'm very glad to see those state attorney generals suing the companies.
Well, I think on the grounds that
a lot of
the
money to
government
us.
can sue is kind of interesting, because the government is costing them billions of dollars. That's one thing. But
It's
for
costing
individuals
us,
to
it's
sue,
costing us all
individuals to
lots
sue
of
doesn't
money.
seem right to me, because you got to take responsibility for yourself.
Well, we're going to be back next week. We're going to be covering some more of these issues about church and state, about the abortion clinics, about gay rights, about a lot of the issues that we face every day, the drugs, all that kind of stuff. So I hope you join us.
Yeah, and give us a call if you have any questions or you need any legal advice or legal problems that you have and you might want to discuss with us. Give us a call. We'd love to hear from you.
And thanks for watching.
Good night. That was long, but seconds. As the debate heats up about the death penalty in New York, a survey of the nation's police chiefs concluded that most police chiefs and county sheriffs do not think capital punishment is an effective law enforcement tool. The Death Penalty Information Center said that 2/3 of the police chiefs said they do not believe executions reduce homicides. The chiefs do believe that politicians support the death penalty to show that they are tough on crime. The officials put reducing drug abuse, improving the job market, and imposing longer prison sentences as better alternatives to reduce violent crime. I like that washover effect you did better. New York City police shot 247 bullets, killing the gunman and a bystander. An officer, chasing a suspect in the subway beneath Rockefeller Center, shot himself in the thigh with his holstered gun. Panicked passengers stampede. 8 officers injured an armed bandit and a customer stopping the holdup of a small store. The scorecard? Police, 125 shots. Bad guys? 0. In all 3 recent incidents, police were carrying rapid-firing 9mm semi-automatic handguns. In the recent store shooting, 1 officer fired 45 bullets. Officials are worried that too many police bullets are flying for no reason. Quote, "I'm very interested in why anyone would need to fire that many rounds," Police Commissioner Bratton said. The police stopped using .38 caliber guns for semi-automatics in late 1993 because they were concerned that the criminals were outgunning the police. The Civilian Complaint Review Board issued a report showing an increase in fatal shootings involving police. Officers shot and killed 31 people, including 2 bystanders in 1994. The semi-automatic is now used by police in Atlanta, Boston, Los Angeles, and other cities. Quote, "The 9mm is here to stay," Bratton said. "There's not even a contemplation of changing it." The NAACP Board of Directors has spent as much time fighting amongst themselves lately as they have fighting racism. The NAACP's new board chairwoman, Myrlie Evers Williams, defeated longtime chairman William Gibson by one vote Saturday in a board election where she charged Gibson with financial mistakes and worse, running the financial Sorry, I had to cough. The NAACP Board of Directors has spent as much time fighting amongst themselves lately as they have fighting racism. The NAACP's new board chairwoman, Myrlie Evers-Williams, defeated longtime chairman William Gibson by one vote Saturday in a board election where she charged Gibson with financial mistakes and worse while running the NAACP. On Wednesday, the NAACP put forth a lobbying agenda that includes preserving affirmative action, crime prevention programs, the motor voter registration law, opposing the balanced budget amendment, and making sure welfare reform plans do not become a tool used to disenfranchise blacks. The House took its first swipe at affirmative action voting 381 to 44 to eliminate a minority tax break. Obviously, we have an assault on Black America, said Leon Russell, an NAACP board member. What they're saying is that there are things that should be reserved for the white males. Hey. A doctor whose controversial treatments have drawn celebrity clients, including Muhammad Ali, must pay $14 million for negligence in treating one woman's breast cancer, a jury ruled. The Taylors claim the doctor was negligent in adding the drug mitomycin C to her standard chemotherapy drugs. Wait a second. Something.
Yeah, stop. And I'm also in this picture. my shoulder.
It doesn't matter.
It was kind of funky to me.
Oops.
Let me just move it over a trace. Okay, oh, there you go. Now we can show. All right. Oh, perfect. Perfecto.
Oh.
Are you ready? Here we go.
A doctor whose controversial treatments that have drawn celebrity clients, including Muhammad Ali, must now pay $14 million for negligence in treating a woman's breast cancer, a jury ruled. The Taylors claim the doctor was negligent in adding the drug mitomycin C to her standard chemotherapy drugs. As a result of the treatment, Mrs. Taylor suffered kidney damage and became too weak for other cancer treatments. Cancer has since spread to her lungs and liver and recurred in her breast. The jury awarded $4 million in compensatory damages and $10 million in punitive damages. Medenica's treatments include blood cleansing, the procedure that Ali underwent. The boxing champion almost died during that treatment when his blood pressure dropped dangerously low. Medenica said Ali suffered from pesticide poisoning. This isn't the right story. Breath. Maybe she does it as a defense mechanism.
It's a bad defense.
No, it's a good one.
Are you ready?
I'm thinking of eating. Mississippi state senators killed a bill Tuesday that would have legalized whippings for convicted felons. A Senate Judiciary Subcommittee unanimously rejected the bill, which had cleared the House as part of a proposal allowing judges to order a defendant to perform hard labor. The bill gave circuit and county judges the option to order paddlings. It did not specify what device would be used or who would deliver the licks. Senator Kay Cobb said judges already can order defendants to work off fines. Joe Clay Hamilton, another state senator, said some senators supported the bill only because it was popular among Mississippians fearful of crime. Quote, people are going to grandstand to the public, especially in an election year, he said. The bill cannot be revived, but the paddling provision could be inserted in another bill.
Yeah, that wouldn't work.
Did you guys ever listen to the Carpenters?
Yeah.
I listened to them last night. They're really
I thought of her
good.
tape when I was eating a whole lot of food. I was thinking to myself how the opposite of it.
You don't understand. I cried myself to sleep thinking of her starving herself.
Are you ready?
Carbon monoxide overcame 9 people at a dance class and a nurse who arrived to pick up her daughter. And the nurse who arrived to pick up her daughter is credited with alerting authorities who pulled them to safety. Cheryl Cassidy said she opened the door to the art center inside of a converted church building, and the instructor's father collapsed right in front of her. Then she saw her 11-year-old daughter Rachel, 6 other students, and the dance teacher lying on the floor. She suspected carbon monoxide poisoning, and before helping even her daughter, she ran across the street to her home, to the home of Dawes County Sheriff Carl Daly. He then called the rescue squad, and he and his sons began pulling the people to safety. All 9 were treated at a nearby hospital, and they were okay, but they were held overnight for observation.
Ready? We all on? Mix it around. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in. I think we had a great show this week, John. And if any of you guys out there have any legal questions or comments, please call us at the number you'll see up on your screen.
Thanks for joining us. Good night.
See you next time.
Let's do it again, okay? Let's not refer to guys.
What?
I don't want to get a bunch of guys calling you.
What?
If any of you guys, just say if any of you people or something. If anyone.
Whatever.
All right?
That's all we have time for tonight, so thanks for tuning in.
We'll see you next week. No, let's do that over again. You surprised me. Let me do it. Well, that's all we have time for tonight. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
And if anybody out there has any questions, legal questions for us, or comments about the show, give us a call on the number that you see on your screen. Good night. Thanks for watching.
Good night.
Fuck yeah, America!
That's not very nice. Okay.
If you can get in the habit of carrying a book, and you read 5 pages here and 9 pages there, over the course of a year, you can read 10 or 20 books just in the period other people waste. And so I read very intensely, and frankly, the greatest personal thrill out of being a congressman is that I have the Library of Congress. Dr. Borstein has presided over an extraordinary institution, and I get a great thrill out of being allowed to borrow books in the Library of Congress. And I'm probably, among congressmen at least, maybe one of the 2 or 3 most intense users of the library.
Newt Gingrich went to Emory University in Atlanta and graduated in 1965 with a degree in history. He then went to Tulane University, where he earned his PhD in history. While at Emory, he married his high school geometry teacher in 1962. They had 2 daughters, Linda Kathleen and Jacqueline Sue. They were divorced in 1981. He remarried that same year.
Newt's first marriage to Jackie is one that's been talked about quite a lot in the national press. Tell me what you want to be known about that story in his life, because we hear so much and such criticism of it.
That most of it isn't true. They don't know what she has done to him. When they got it is not true that she was in a hospital bed and he came in with a list of what he wanted out of the marriage. That is not true. And like he said to me one time, they never say anything about my taking the girls in to see their mother. That just isn't repeated, you know, that's on the good side for Gingrich. But when they finally settled their divorce, she got $15,000 a year. She got the home, she got 2 cars, and she got the money for both girls to go to any college they wanted to go to. And they went to very good, expensive private schools. And then when he made whip, she comes in again. She needs more money. Now, she's a teacher, a math teacher, very good one. And I think that he finally settled for $500. I don't know if that was a month. I'm not sure on that. But also sign a paper that this would be the last demands that she could make on him.
Why do you think that you hear so much of the negative about that circumstance?
That's what people want to read. That's what they enjoy, you know.
Is that a marriage that you thought wouldn't last when he made it?
When he made it.
He was pretty young when he got married.
19. I don't know. I look for the good things. You know, I don't think that maybe they won't. And then they had Kathy, and she was that little doll. And 2 years later, they had Jackie Sue. And they never had it easy, money-wise. Nudie at Emory managed apartments. He had a newspaper route, which I went on in one Easter.
Newt Gingrich spent the years 1970 to 1978 teaching at West Georgia College.
I don't remember the precise date, but it was in September of 1970, and Newt was a brand new professor at West Georgia College. He had just moved his family here, and they lived right across the street from the campus, literally across the street. And I think they had begun unpacking, and he decided that Saturday morning to walk over and look at the campus. He'd never seen it before because he had applied for the job while he was in Belgium, finishing up a doctoral dissertation, and had been hired sight unseen just based on the stuff he'd sent us. Yeah, at first it was just another professor. He had piqued my interest considerably when he applied. I was on the committee that was deciding who we hire and that sort of thing. And our chairman at the time, Dr. Ben Kennedy, and I talked about Newt. One of the things he included in his application was a long reading list. So you'll know more about me. These are the books I've read in the past year. And it was a full page of the most eclectic list of books I'd ever seen. He had stuff on business management, on zoology, on history, on government, international politics, some novels. I think there was something on yoga or something in it. It's just a wide range of things. His credentials were flawless. He graduated from Emory University with his undergraduate degree, and then Tulane with his master's and doctorate, and had very good recommendations. And so we felt we wanted to try this guy out. He really looks interesting. And one of the few people that we saw at the time that had actually put together a full page on why he wanted to teach and what he wanted to do. When I'm in the classroom, I want to do these things. This is what's important to me as a teacher, etc. And it was a fascinating package that he had sent. So when he said, "I'm Newt Gingrich," I said, "Oh yeah, you're the guy that sent us the book list." And we began talking about that. And once he gets talking, he just keeps talking. And so we spent a good part of the morning visiting and talking.
And how did the relationship between Mr. Gingrich and yourself progress from there over the next couple of years?
I became one of Newt's friends. People that knew Newt at that time liked him a lot. He was an extremely likable guy. And he and I became very good friends during that period.
Professionally and socially?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Take us into that.
He, well, we were, I guess at that time, probably 18 to 21 faculty members in history. And we were fairly close. We spent a lot of time together socially, away from campus. On campus, he and I literally taught, a team taught classes together. We taught a course on 20th century world history called The 20th Century World. And Newt handled the American history part of it, and I did the European part. And a professor who was his office mate at the time, named Floyd Hoskins, Dr. Hoskins, he took the Asian part of it. And so we got to know each other pretty well, teaching together in the same classroom with the same students, and did a lot of experimenting. And I remember at one point we didn't tell Hoskins, but Gingrich and I fought World War II backwards. And not exactly backwards. We had, everywhere America won, we lost, and everywhere we lost, we won. And so we ended up with the Russians and Germans joining together and conquering the United States and all this. And we were trying to find out what effect this will have on the students. And most of them sat there and just took notes faithfully, went right along. And a few of them raised questions. And when we had the United States losing the Battle of Guadalcanal, Hoskins had to stand up at that point. He said, that's not true. You know, I was there, and he won a Silver Star for his performance at Guadalcanal in the Navy. And we said, well, Floyd, your ship was sunk, and you were in the water. You didn't know what was going on. And he said, well, yeah. I said, okay, sit down. And so we had a good time talking with students and being provocative. And Newt was more provocative than either of us were. But we established a good working relationship and professional relationship. And all of us had the view of trying to inspire students and trying to make them think. That was our main objective. Not so much learn facts, but learn to think critically and to take the facts and develop something from it. Socially, we did not go to the same church, but we had basically the same ideas, I think, about religion. We would be involved politically. I kept trying to get Newt to be a Democrat. And he wasn't real interested in doing that. He was very active in work with the Republican Party, primarily in Atlanta, in the state party. And so I wasn't involved in much of his early 70, 71, 72 period. He was separate from us because I was involved at that time with Democrats. And
was he involved politically at all?
Yeah, very much involved, but not running for anything. He was involved helping other people do things.
From the moment he stepped on campus?
Oh, yeah. He was, from 1960 on, he was involved politically. He worked in Nixon's race when he was in high school in Muskogee County, which is Columbus, Georgia, which is Fort Benning, where his daddy was stationed.
Getting back to the students just for a minute, did they like him as a professor?
Yeah. Yeah, they sure did. I'm doing a biography of Gingrich now, and in the process I've interviewed a lot of the students and professors, and they thought very highly of him. They sure did.
Do you, what are you hearing as you're preparing for the book? What sort of things have stuck with people over the years?
How provocative he was, how much he tried to inspire students to think, how he would not tell them what to do so much as force them to look at things differently. I remember one time he came in and made a statement. He was forever making bold statements that the students would have to respond to. And this particular one he talked about in the next century, which wasn't that far away at the time, Brazil will dominate the Western Hemisphere. You know, what do you think about that? And then they, you know, what are you talking about? And then some students would say, well, that's possible, and explain why. And then other students would say, no, that can't happen, and this is why. And a lot of times Newt didn't really care one way or the other. The statements he would think up were simply provocative things to make people think and walk through stuff. And it had that effect, and they really liked him. Frequently he would have students following him home. He'd finish an environmental studies class, for instance, and they would wander over to his house with him because it was so close to campus and sit around and drink coffee or Cokes or whatever and continue talking.
Have you spoken to any of those students since Election Day of this year?
Yeah.
Are any of them surprised that he wound up as Speaker of the House?
Yeah, they are. They never really thought about it. Most of those students were not deeply involved in the political side of Newt. Some of them were. Some of them actually went on and were so impressed with the man that they became workers in his campaigns. One of them was his driver for 2 campaigns, 76 and 78, and then worked for him briefly for about a year when he became a congressman. So they were a pretty committed bunch. But a lot of them were surprised, yeah. And a lot of the people that knew Newt, for instance, one of the things that happened on his street is they did block parties, and Newt enjoyed the block parties. He also enjoyed having the close friends of his come over in the evening for all-night pig roast. He would dig up his driveway, which was dirt and gravel, and dig a pit, and would cook a pig all night and have barbecue the next day. And a group of us would sit around and drink a beer or two or whatever and talk and philosophize and lie to each other and do all of that sort of thing. all evening, and those were very interesting evenings, and it was a real eclectic group of people. You had people in humanistic psychology would sit in, and others would be very conservative types, and others would be very moderate. It didn't really matter your politics so much as it did whether you were an interesting person, and you'd like to get ideas and understand how people thought and what made them tick, that sort of thing.
You mentioned that you shared common religious values, but you didn't go to the same church, I believe.
No, I had been a Baptist, and by the time Newt came, was a member of the Methodist Church. And
you were a member?
I was a member of the Methodist Church. I grew up as a Baptist, but I had joined the Methodist Church when I returned. I'd been in Carrollton for a few years, and then I went off to Germany to do work on my doctoral dissertation and came back, and then I joined the Methodist Church when I returned. And when Newt came, he joined the First Baptist Church, and was a deacon, became a deacon very quickly in that church when he was here.
I really feel, Brian, incredibly rich. There's a scene you may remember in Lawrence of Arabia, where Anthony Quinn is playing an Arab. Says to Lawrence that he has given away all of his money to his people, but he is rich beyond belief because of his family, meaning his whole tribe. And I look back over my life, my mom and dad, a time when my dad was on a first lieutenant's salary and clearly couldn't afford it. He bought the Encyclopedia Americana, which was very expensive back in the mid-50s, because he wanted me to have access to knowledge. I think of all the times my mother put up with me and kept encouraging me to do things that were clearly nutty, but that were training for me to go on and learn the business I'm in. A man who's now deceased named Paul Walker, who ran a classic small-town weekly giveaway newspaper in Harrisburg called the Home Star. And I walked in at the age of 10. I was sent over to see him because I wanted a zoo for Harrisburg. And he said to me, you write the article and I'll print it. He said, there's a typewriter. It was an old-time, pound-away kind of typewriter. And I said, I can't type. He said, you can now. And he said, so I sat down and I wrote an open letter to the people of Harrisburg, which he put on page 1 of that local paper, and it was about why we needed a zoo in Harrisburg. And you know, you do things like that. And you have a guy like that who was then in his 50s who encouraged me. And over the years, he gave me a clipping one time of a little article about Abraham Lincoln having lost 5 times. And I lost twice before I finally won. And many was the time when I was out there shaking hands after those 2 defeats, when I think of that clipping that Paul Walker gave me on persistence. And I think my attitude towards the news media, the reason that I'm so accessible and that I try to always be available, goes back to the training that Paul gave me all the way up through high school. And when we were in Europe, I'd write letters home and he'd write back. Nando Amabile, a man who lives here in Washington now, was my sophomore English teacher after I had decided that I really did want to be involved in this process of preserving and extending freedom. And I went to him and said, I want to write a paper on the balance of world power. And that's all I want to do for my sophomore English class in high school. And he said, fine. So I wrote what was about a 200-page paper as a sophomore. And he said, I'll read it once. And he was here, and he wrote me after I finally won, and he said he thought I really vindicated his willingness to risk on kids, that I'd done things he'd hoped I'd do. So I look back over all these people, Dr. Yielding at Baker High, who taught government and who believed in the courage of your conviction and that that's what America was.
Newt Gingrich first ran for a seat in the House of Representatives in 1974. He lost that race and lost again in 1976. However, in 1978, he won the 6th District congressional seat from Georgia. Gaining seniority, Mr. Gingrich became the minority whip in the House in 1989, and now has been elected Speaker of the House by the new Republican majority.
Let's talk about 1974. He had been here for 4 years, or almost 4 years, I guess, and he decided to run for Congress the first time, correct?
Well, he decided in 73, but 74 was the first race. That's right.
Tell us, any conversations with you on whether he should do that or not?
Yeah, we talked about it quite a bit. He, I guess, really began talking first with the people in the party rather than with college folks. He was more concerned to get a strong base and to be sure that they thought it was the right thing to do and that they would support him. And So he had begun talking to county and district chairmen and people he met who had been active in the Republican Party, and had kind of a group together that felt it was a good thing for him to do. And a lot of people had approached him and suggested he ought to run for something, but most of them thought he ought to run for state senate or state representative. And he and I talked about it off and on. He felt like he could actually win a race. I told him I didn't think he could. And I was trying to convince him that he should run as Democrat and maybe go for state senate or something of that sort and win one of those races, get to be a little high profile, and then go for Congress. And he wasn't real sure that that's what he wanted to do. And I remember one morning he came early. My wife brought us some pancakes and coffee down. We sat in my den, and this was in '73, and he laid out why he thought he could win. And he had the numbers and the county votes and totals, and had looked at it very carefully. And he convinced me that morning, did away with my skepticism, that it was possible. And so we spent a good long morning talking about it and debating it, and me trying, in a sense, to talk him out of it. And by the time we got through talking, he had talked me into supporting him, and so I did. I was very active in his campaign.
Did anybody here on the campus, it being an academic atmosphere, have problems with the fact that he was launching a political career from his academic base, for lack of a better term?
I don't remember any particular problems. He received the support of the president of the college, the dean. All of these people gave him permission to take unpaid leave of absence and that sort of thing. I think there might have been some individuals on campus who felt like it was not a good thing to do, that he couldn't possibly be a good teacher if he was doing this. He needed to focus strictly on teaching and nothing else, that sort of thing. But that's a guess on my part. I don't remember any particular person.
Did you have an official role in that campaign?
Yeah. I was a volunteer coordinator. I worked to get Democrats to support Newt, and was on his, in fact, I was chairman of the advisory committee, which was a small group of people that advised him on what he should be doing the next week and what kind of strategy to take and that sort of thing.
He lost that race.
He lost it. He got 48.5% of the vote, lost by 2,774 votes. Came very close to winning.
Lost the race and came back here and continued teaching?
Mm-hmm.
Walk us through, very briefly, the next cycle, 1976.
He was determined when he lost the first race, and having come so close, that he definitely was going to run again. A lot of people asked him to do that, wanted him to do it. They felt it was a good thing. I think he probably would have, whether anybody had asked him to or not, because he had wanted to be in Congress since he was a teenager. And he worked, I would guess, almost constantly from well, let's see, I guess he took a little time off in November, right after the defeat, and picked up again around the first of the year. But at that point, he had a driver who would pick him up, a volunteer driver, and after he would get through with his classes and do whatever committee work he had to do, if he had 5 or 6 hours free in the afternoon or evening, he would be out campaigning. And that's in '73. He continued that campaign nonstop. And in a sense, since his defeat, excuse me, not '73, it'd be '75. He had the election in '74, lost it. '75, all during that year, he continued working. And in a sense, has never stopped. It was during that first campaign that they came up with the support group for his campaign called Friends of Newt Gingrich. And the reason they called it that is because it literally is what it was. The very first people that supported him were personal friends. And when we tried to get money, those were the people that went to the bank with him and said, okay, we're going to borrow $2,000, and each of us will sign on for $100, this sort of thing. You get 20 guys that'll agree, we'll pay $100 or we'll pay $500 or whatever. And we used that technique frequently in his first 2 campaigns to get support.
And he lost again in '76? How close was that race?
That was a very close race. He lost, it was about, he might have gotten 49% in that one. It was very close, though.
And decided again to go continue campaigning for '78?
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a little difference. See that you had mitigating circumstances here. In '74, right before the election, Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon, and that really turned a lot of people off. And he thought, you know, if Ford hadn't done that, I might have made it. Then in '76, when he was running, Jimmy Carter was running for president. In Georgia, that meant a lot of people voted straight Democrat because they wanted to help Jimmy. And so Newt was running against that. And he figured, okay, the third time, hopefully none of this is going to be happening to me, and I can have a straight shot at it. Well, as it turned out, the man he had been running against, Congressman Flint, John Flint, retired. He decided not to run in '78. And so it was an open shot at it. And the person who won the Democratic nomination was a state senator from Griffin, Georgia, by the name of Virginia Shepard. And so Newt was able to run against her and not against Flint at that time. He also had been encouraged, incidentally, by Guy Vanderjack to work in the, or to run in the '78 race. Vanderjack wanted him to run. He was head of the, what is the RNCC, I guess, at the time, and believed that Newt could win it, and began to try to help a little more than they had in the past in finances and sending down professionals, people like this, to help out.
So he lost twice and won in 1978?
He won in 1978.
And has been reelected every time?
Has been reelected ever since.
Minor story you'll appreciate. In 1960, I knew a lot. I'd read a lot of books, and I was very aggressive and, you know, all that, and very brash. Prince came and said, I like you, what you're doing. I'd like you to run my campaign. I'm going to run for Congress. He was a very attractive, dynamic vice president of a chicken company in Gainesville, Georgia. It tells a lot about my luck that he and I happened to be in the only district Barry Goldwater didn't carry. And so I went up there to work for him, and he began to figure out that I knew a lot about politics from books, but I didn't know a lot about life yet. I was a pretty young kid, and I was 20 years old at the time. And we came to Washington for the first big visit to convince the various interest groups in Washington to back Jack Prince for Congress. And when he found himself showing me how to tie a tie, because I'd always used a clip-on to that point, I think it sort of began to dawn on him we had a long way to go. But Jack Prince, I was with Jack 2 weeks ago in Gainesville, and he's another one of those people who really educated me and taught me a lot, and then we had worked out as part of the agreement that he would co-sign notes for me to go back to school and finish my college. And I will always, I guess the rest of my life, owe a great deal to Jack Prince.
We are in room 303 of the Humanities Building on the campus of West Georgia College in Carrollton, Georgia, the place where we spent many hours working with Newt Gingrich, training him in the art of debate. Newt came here in the early '70s and was on the faculty in history, developed an environmental studies program, ran some unsuccessful campaigns against Jack Flint, and then finally won. And once he won, we became very closely associated with him in terms of not only just myself, but the members of the debating team. A former West Georgia debater ran his 1992 campaign.
You both came here at the same time?
Yes, we joined the faculty at the same time.
What did you think of him when you first met him?
Newt struck me as an incredibly bright, good listener, well-read, a little hot under the collar at times. In fact, through the years, one of our biggest problems has been to keep him logical in debate and not get too emotional. But that's difficult. But we did that specifically by training him in this very room. He would stand at that podium. Newt would sit at this table here, and we would fill the room with a hostile audience. For example, let me show you a clip of a debate where we were preparing him to debate at the Oxford Union against the Vice President of Nicaragua. Newt had never participated in an Oxford-style debate where they heckle you from the audience. And so he said, Chester, I'd like to have that experience. So I'll show you a tape here of where we got Newt in this room, and we would go through the process of, I would actually debate him, and then he would stand up, make his arguments, and then the folks in the audience would ask questions. In fact, right in the middle of his speech, they would interrupt him and ask questions. And after he came back from the Oxford Union, he was very pleased with his performance. You may notice in his training that Newt relies on 3x5 index cards. He spends some time, maybe 5 minutes before a major speech, writing the speech. He speaks extemporaneously very effectively because he has a great memory. But sometimes he gets himself in trouble when he speaks off the cuff without thinking. He himself has admitted that some of his language that he's used has not been very effective, and we had to work on that. I think one of the things we did that was very successful with Newt was keeping him focused on facts and information in the debate rather than the emotional side of it.
What year is this?
This is in the mid-'80s, about 1984, 1985, when he was preparing for this debate, and they had focused on our relationships in Central America. And when Newt actually got to the debate, we don't have time to show you the video of it, but I keep videos of all of Newt's debates. I have a video of that debate, and the audience loved him. He discarded his notes, he discarded his manuscript, and he just spoke, and they stood and cheered at the Oxford Union, and he even got a lot of votes, even though he was detested there by a lot of people.
Did you go over there with him?
No, but he came back. When he came back, we immediately called a crowd together in Carrollton and showed the tape of the debate, and they loved it. He is a skilled communicator. I also worked with him in terms of debating against his political opponents. We have worked on how you would phrase certain arguments. One thing, for example, that Newt likes to do is he likes to turn an opponent's argument on them. David Worley in a debate, for example, we have a tape of that. David Worley would say, well, now I'm basically a conservative. And Newt would turn to him and say, well, did you vote for Michael Dukakis? And Worley would refuse to answer the question. And Newt would simply say, it's a simple question. Did you vote for Michael Dukakis? That will tell us whether you're a conservative or not. And Worley was trying to appeal to all the conservative voters in this district, but when he would not reveal whether or not he voted for Mondale or Dukakis, Newt felt that he had him pinned as a liberal, and that was a strategy of Newt's.
Most people know or have heard probably that he is formerly was a history professor. What kind of student was he? Is he a good student?
He is a great listener. After these debates would end, for example, he would sit at that table and let us just blast him. For example, he rambles all the time. Sometimes Newt you'll ask him a question and he'll go all over the world, and it's a great answer that he's giving, but he takes too long. And so we would say, Newt, why don't you, instead of saying that in 6 minutes, why don't you say it in 1? And he would not get defensive. I have never seen him defensive when being criticized in a debate situation, but he will get defensive when someone in a debate tries to personalize the attacks on him. And that's kind of interesting because Newt tends to use that strategy himself, but it's still, he is able, I think, through being a good listener and being a good reader, to be a great debater.
What other tapes do you have? You mentioned a campaign of his.
Oh, yes. I think that one of my favorite times was when the West Georgia College debating team sponsored a debate here on campus against David Worley. And in this particular debate, David Worley was making a comment about Newt going on a jaunt to Iraq during the time that the war was going on. And Newt got very upset at the fact that Worley would call his trip over there a jaunt. So here we are. This is a West Georgia College debater that's on the panel asking David Worley what he thought about Newt's trip overseas. And Worley said, I think it's just a junket he's going on. And Newt, we knew that was coming, so we said, Newt, don't get angry when Worley accuses you of going on a junket. And don't even look at Worley. We would coach him not to look at Worley because that tended to get Newt even more upset when Worley would do that kind of thing. So you'll notice when the camera pans over to Newt, you'll see him looking straight ahead at the audience and not looking at his opponent. I think they were kind of so hostile toward each other they didn't even shake hands before the debate. And that is not unusual. Newt wants to let people know that if they're going to say despicable things that are not true, he's not going to associate with them. So this was a situation in which we would train Newt after the debate. We would bring the videotape up here. We'd take a look at the debate and tell Newt what he did right and wrong.
Do you keep in touch with him these days and call him up and tell him, I saw you on, whatever the morning show is? And
through Mel Steele, Newt and I stay in communication. A lot of it is written communication. He writes me letters saying, this is what I need to know. For example, when he was putting the course together at Kennesaw, he wrote a letter and asked me to do that. So yes, we write constantly. So there have been times when he's just sit down when he's at the table with the president and writing a personal note to him. And Newt does a lot of that. Someone told me that he was still writing the contract for America on the steps of the Capitol right before the speech. I don't know if that's true or not, but that sounds just like Newt, because he prepares a lot, but sometimes that preparation is in a small period of time.
Let's watch a little of this debate with Newt Gingrich. What year was this again?
This is a debate in 1990 against Worley, and we'll be glad to let you hear some of the comments that Newt is making. This is particularly a comment, I think, about Iraq.
Very, very good question. I should say that the other night when I had a chance to talk by telephone with the Desert Shield families here in Carrollton, and Catherine Brock was there representing me, it was really a powerful reminder of the human side of the buildup. As you know, I've spent several days over there at the request of Secretary of Defense Cheney as part of the leadership delegation. And it was very sobering. We met with Marines, Air Force, Navy, and Army forces, also met with the Saudi Arabians, the Kuwaitis, and the Egyptians. Had about 2 hours with the King of Saudi Arabia and about an hour and a half with the President of Mubarak of Egypt. I believe, based on everything I've seen in the briefings I've had, that we had no choice. That Saddam Hussein is an extraordinarily dangerous man, that all of our intelligence operations indicated he was about to invade Saudi Arabia, that if he retains 20% of the world's oil supply, which is what he'll have with Kuwait, that
there's no question that his skills have increased. He has learned, for example, not to be so defensive. There was one debate against Joe Kennedy on the Larry King show in which Joe Kennedy just ate Newt alive. And it's because he was able to get Newt on the defensive about George Bush. And immediately after I heard that debate, I wrote Newt a scathing 2-page letter in which I said, you should never lose a debate to Joe Kennedy, but you just lost it because you didn't stay on the offensive and you let him get on the defensive. Same thing happens here. You'll notice, for example, he is not looking at David Worley. Throughout this 1 hour and a half debate, he refused to look at David Worley. He would look at the audience, he would get the crowd going, get them stirred up, and Newt really does well when he gets the audience with him.
How recently have you given him any advice on debating or public speaking?
I sent a letter to him after some of these comments came out with regards to his vitriolic use of language and hate speech and that kind of thing. I do think that Newt chooses words inappropriately at times, and within the last 6 months I sent him a letter to that effect. One time he asked me, he said, Chester, what do I need to do to project the image of a statesman? And I said, Newt, one of the things that you need to do is to be more thoughtful about the language that you're going to use before you use it. You don't always have to use a scathing attack. Be more of a teacher. And he appreciated that comment because Newt is great when he is at a teaching role. But he's also great when someone wants to sting him with something. If they accuse him, for example, on the orphanage, the use of the orphanage, his retort to that was, would you prefer to see them in a dumpster? And just the visual image of that conjures up some feeling on behalf, well, maybe orphanages aren't bad when you compare it to the alternative. But when he makes statements like, he made one, my purpose is to move the planet, it may well be that's an objective, but it comes across sometimes as arrogant. I think he's also improved in terms of his appearance. When he's on television, for example, you'll notice that his head always tilts to the right. I've given him that criticism several times. Now, that may be subconscious, tilt to the right. But he does not always have a good appearance on television when he moves his hands in front of his face. But he's learned some things like that, and he's very receptive to those types of criticisms.
What does he need to work on, do you think, as a coach, as a debating teacher?
First of all, he needs to take a little bit more time before he's going to make a formal presentation. Newt is always in such a hurry. He's a hard worker, works 16, 18 hours a day, but he needs to take a few more minutes of preparation time before a major speech. He shouldn't write it out in a manuscript. In fact, I coached him when he was preparing for the course in Kennesaw, had a letter from him in which he said that the suggestion about speaking from an outline for him was a lot better than speaking from a manuscript. John Kennedy could use a manuscript. Newt Gingrich is a disaster with a manuscript. But he needs more preparation time before the speech. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the human side of Newt Gingrich has not really come out before the public. He has a deep sense of humanity about him that does not come across in his communication. And I really believe, I would like for the American public to see that side of him, because he is characterized as a vicious, mean-spirited, tough-talking individual. But there's also a compassionate side to Newt Gingrich, because he really believes that the system has to change for America to be better. And I'd like for him to show more of that side.
How do you go about doing that if that is, and you think that's more of a natural way that he is? Why do you have to tell somebody to do something to look more natural? You know what I'm asking?
Well, because in the age of television, where the image that is projected there has such an impact upon public opinion, I think you have to pay attention to those kinds of things. I think you have to pay attention to the kind of language that you use, because those sound bites, for example, Sam Donaldson can bait Newt Gingrich. Sam will ask a question by saying, "Isn't it a dumb thing?" And then Newt will pick up on "dumb thing" and start making outrageous statements incorporating Sam's term. I don't think that's a good idea, because sometimes those newsmen are baiting you.
You seem to have some fairly serious conversations with him. How does he respond when you tell him, you know, he didn't come off well or he lost that debate?
In 24 years, never a single defensive response, because he knows, since I'm not one of his paid consultants, I have no axe to grind or anything. I'm just telling him what I think about his performance. And it really, to have me say that he lost to Joe Kennedy was not an easy thing for his Newt's ego. But Joe Kennedy just was able to beat him in that debate situation because he was on the defensive. Newt is, as he was in the training in this room, he would welcome the most vocal opponent to blast him in any way they could, and he maintains control in spite of that criticism. And I think that's the mark of a person who wants to be better and to communicate better what his ideas are. Newt does not always communicate what's in his mind. His words sometimes get in the way, and he's sometimes too verbose.
We haven't talked at all about politics. Do you share his political worldview?
Yes, in fact, he has sent to me other political candidates. Paul Coverdale has been in this room when he was debating against Weiss Fowler. Mac Mattingly sat in this room. I have a conservative political philosophy. I don't agree with all of the positions that he takes, but and that's a rare breed on the college campus. Most are. You'll find a lot of the professors here would not share my views on Newt Gingrich, but I share the view that our society has got to have less government to be more effective.
What are some of the lunchroom conversations these days when the name Newt Gingrich comes up here on the campus?
Newt Gingrich on this campus is probably not in great favor with a lot of the professors, especially in some of the departments that he worked with very closely. I know some of them feel very strongly that he is an unethical person, power-hungry, interested in nothing but his own personal advancement. And so you'll find a good bit of criticism, although I will say that Newt, we have a new president at West Georgia College, and I think they have communicated some. Newt gave money to our alumni association, and so he has been a supporter of West Georgia College and has a small core of supporters here, but I wouldn't say that it's widespread.
In April 1978, I was a 23-year-old student resuming his education at West Georgia College, and Newt was in his last quarter as a teacher, in this case in the biology building. I had made a comment to a teacher in that building that in a class that I had that I was interested in politics, and this lady said, I can't remember her name, but she said, you know, we have this guy down the hall that has actually run for Congress twice and lost. But he's running again this year, and he may need a volunteer, he may need a driver, he may need you to do something for him. So after about a week of deciding, I checked in the almanac to make sure this guy really was somebody who'd run for Congress, and I thought, wow, there he is. You know, he's right down the hall in our building. I went to see him, talked a little bit about tax cuts. He gave me a book to read. He said, okay, you can be an assistant driver. You can drive me on Saturdays. A guy named Arthur Fessenden needs time off now and then, so you can drive me on Saturdays. So I started doing that every second or third Saturday, and then eventually became a campaign research director in '78.
When you were in the car driving with him, what did you talk about?
Oh, it was early Newt. I mean, it was, what do we do about South Africa? What do we do about the minimum wage? What would you do about capital formation? It was almost like a master's orals, and which was great, because I had always wanted to find somebody important to talk about these things to. And I had some ideas, and he listened, and he gave me things to think about. One of the interesting things from '78 was that he got me to go to a professor that he knew and that I knew and arrange an independent study course designed around the Kennedy tax cuts. Now, the Kemp-Roth tax cut of '78 was based on the Kennedy tax cut of '62 to '64. And so Newt said, why don't you go get credit for studying this Kennedy's tax cut and how it turned out and how he passed it. Write that paper. You can get credit for it. Give the paper to me. I need to know, and here are some of the questions that, that you can answer. So this guy was an innovator, sort of a all equals all guy from day one. He would figure out a way, which is the secret of political leadership, to meet different people's objective and also help him, you know, along the way.
Do you remember how you did in the paper?
Oh, I got an A+. It was a great paper.
What is the Conservative Opportunity Society?
The Conservative Opportunity Society is a name and a theme that was hatched, discovered, put together, I'm not sure what the verb was, in the spring of '82. I was Newt's chief of staff at the time. Newt was looking for a formulation that would contrast with a formulation to characterize liberals and Democrats. So working with Bob Teeter and Dick Worthlam, he tested a number of formulations, and I remember the day he came back into the office so excited because he found one for our side that would swamp the other side. At the time, it was Conservative Opportunity State. We didn't have society at that point, versus liberal welfare state. A poll had been run on this by the NRCC, and the results were, it was a generic congressional test. Would you vote for a candidate if you knew nothing about him, except that he were a conservative, favored a conservative opportunity state, against a candidate for Congress who, if you knew nothing about him, favored a liberal welfare state? The result was 74 to 17 for COS. And Newt came back and he said, that's it. This is what we're going to use to unify the theme this year. I'm going to get as many of my colleagues as I can to start talking about this. It took about a year. Vin Weber used it in '82, but by '83, we'd lost the number of seats in the House. 26 seats were lost in '82 because of the recession. Newt formed 3 groups, and they were all COS groups. One was a Wednesday noon group, which was conservative activists, Paul Weyrich, Richard Rahn, etc., Bert Pines. Another one was a leadership group with Trent Lott, and the other one was like-minded colleagues, Newt's age, Newt's temperament, that would work and do COS-type projects.
How does his mind work?
Wow. I recently published an article in Roll Call that said you can't understand Newt by going through history text, economic text, liberal, conservative. You have to do it by looking at Jungian psychology. Newt is an extroverted intuitor. He has intuitions galore. They come to him. He can't explain them. He can act on them and then later explain sort of what he's doing if you, as he says, if you stop me and force me to tell you what I'm doing, I'll tell you. Things come to him so fast, and they change from time to time, that nobody in the early days could keep up with him. He needed a larger and larger galaxy of people and organizations and allies to simply try all of the projects and experiments that he would come up with. But in the early days, we were routinely overwhelmed by it. He was the most creative person in the room. He was the most energetic person in the room. And he was not satisfied with what most of us did because he had already moved on at that point by the time we were able to do something.
How long did you work for him?
5 years overall.
Doing what? In addition to the campaign, you moved to the congressional staff?
Yes, I did. I was an LBJ intern. I was a national affairs projects person in 1980, and then I was chief of staff for about, for exactly 21 months, actually. I did some minority enterprise work, and I also, of course, in the early years, or early year, did research for the campaign. So I had different vantage points, but I was usually in the line of fire in terms of what Newt was most enthusiastic about, which was this national Republican majority, building a progressive Republican Party and making it become the majority. And the test was always, will we get a majority in the House? He never wavered from that, and all of the experiments, at least on the national side, were aimed at putting together the coalition, the ideas, the vehicles, the innovations that would bring that about.
The New Conservatives, back to this article in the Dallas Times-Herald, it points out that your fight is not for the presidential nomination, but rather for the House of Representatives, for the congressional wing of the party and the things that Republicans will stand for in the years to come. Is that the truth? Does it not matter so much who is president?
Well, I think it matters some who's president. I think it's good for the country that Ronald Reagan, who is the most effective president since Franklin Roosevelt. But I would just say that I think it is very, very important that we get back to the habit that was built into the Founding Fathers' Constitution, that what the party believes in, where we go over 10, 20, 30 years, is also terribly important. And I think, unfortunately, for the last half century, starting with Franklin Roosevelt, we focus too much on one person. People keep coming up to me on the floor, reporters, and saying, what do you think about 88? And I keep telling them, I don't care about 88. I care about 84. I care about what we do in 85. Now, after that, I'll talk about 86. But we need to learn to build a party movement, not just a one-man or a one-person movement.
Newt is an amazing combination of a practical, applied politician with all of the skills and the joy of battle that comes with the practical world of politics, and at the same time is an intellect of really amazing capabilities. I met Newt, actually was doing some work at the Heritage Foundation on drug abuse, doing some policy work there. And he was interested in that topic. And a friend of mine said, you ought to meet this guy Eisenach. So we got together. What we found out, I think, the first time we met, he and I came to Washington at the same time in 1978. And for 10 years, on parallel and completely unconnected tracks, we'd been thinking many of the same thoughts. He had, frankly, more profound and thoughtful level than I had. But the question we had both been asking and trying to answer is, what would conservative governance look like as opposed to conservative opposition to liberal governance? And it's a question that still remains to be kind of finally answered, but both of us had spent a lot of time thinking that through. I had worked on Pete DuPont's presidential campaign as director of research and issues for that campaign, and we got some ideas out there in terms of welfare and education choice and Social Security, and I think Newt was attracted to some of the things that Pete had been talking about.
Is he an easy person? If one were to sit down with Newt Gingrich for the first time, is he easy to get to know? Is he easy to understand?
He is a very easy person and a very hard person simultaneously. He's very easy in the sense he's very easygoing. He's very open and personable. He's very informal. And there's no kind of false sense of importance about him. There's no shell there. He's all there right in front of you. But that's also what's hard, because he is very, very quick, and he asks very, very hard questions and good questions. So when you sit down in the meeting with Newt Gingrich, if you're going to lay out what you thought was 2 hours worth of ideas, and in the first 5 minutes he's likely to absorb everything that you thought you had to tell him and ask you 10 questions you hadn't thought of, and that can be kind of scary. And it's all in the most kind of pleasant kind of way. But intellectually, boy, it is challenging.
What is the Progress and Freedom Foundation?
Progress and Freedom Foundation is a think tank here in Washington. Jay Keyworth and I created it in 1993. Jay was President Reagan's science advisor. Really based on the notion that America is leaving the industrial age as Alvin and Heidi Toffler talk about the second wave versus the third wave, and entering an information age, and that there are big social consequences of that, there are big political consequences of that, there are big economic consequences of that. At a political level, what we're seeing at the foundation is the breakdown of the old politics of left and right, what's degenerated into a politics of stone throwing, really, which is increasingly irrelevant, and when people look at Washington, I think it's what they don't like, and the emergence of a new politics of the future, where increasingly you see liberals and Democrats, the old left and the old right, coming together to advance ideas that really amount simply to pragmatic change. What the central fact of the transition we're now going through is the recognition that big centralized bureaucracies just aren't a good way to get things done anymore. IBM, General Motors, the Soviet Union, they've all learned that. The federal government hasn't learned that. And increasingly it's clear that to the extent we want to accomplish great things, whether it be taking care of the poor and helping them find their way into jobs, or whether it be making our economy more successful, that the way to accomplish that is not through this giant centralized system of power that we've organized in Washington, it's through decentralization.
From a historical standpoint, you talk about this third wave, the information wave that the Tofflers refer to as well. But how significant is this time in American history?
We're at a time unlike anything since the Civil War. And hopefully, and I think almost surely with a very different outcome from the kind of outcome we had in the Civil War. But the last time we made a transition between the Tofflers' waves, if you will, and they talk about a first wave, which was an agricultural age, or age of farming. Mm-hmm. And America was essentially an agricultural society up through the 1850s. And one of the, not by any means minimizing the importance of slavery, but one of the things happening in the Civil War was a conflict between the industrializing North and the agrarian South. And that led to, obviously a tragedy in American history, but also to fundamental changes as the North ultimately won out and the industrialization of America proceeded. We're in a time, and where beyond that, the roles of citizenship, the roles of the government, arguably the notion of large government institutions arose out of the Army and the success of the federal North, the North in the Civil War. The transformation that's now underway is very similar, but in many ways goes in the opposite direction, because the essence of the third wave, the essence of the information age, is the decentralization of power. A lot of what's happened over the course of the past 60 years is that in order to accomplish great human accomplishments, whether it be NATO or Normandy or Apollo or IBM, you had to give up some of your individuality, some of your freedom. An educator, and without any kind of hubris or sense of self-importance associated with that. But this is someone who dedicated himself at a fairly early age to understanding history, to understanding the great forces at work in our society, who